Well, welcome everyone to the UniCon 2021 discussion panel. Allow me to share the screen right now so we can get started. Okay, can everyone see?
Looks good.
Perfect. Well, like I was saying, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody, depending on where you live in the world. And again, welcome to SCYTHE UniCon. And as Chris mentioned, my name is Nathali Cano. I'm one of the adversary emulation engineers here at SCYTHE, and I will be obviously the panel moderator. And the topic for today is actually Log4Shell lessons from the perfect purple team storm. Actually, let me say that again, because it's not that one. It's Log4Shell lessons from the perfect purple storm. And the panel name is From Theory to Reality, Purple Team Collaboration in Real Time via Log4Shell. What an amazing topic we're going to be exploring today. And I'm actually here joined by a super exciting panel. And I don't want to steal nobody's thunder. So let me just ask David, Cassandra, and Maril to please introduce yourselves. Let's start with Cassandra, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Cassandra. Can you hear me okay? I'm good. I have like 2 different mute buttons, so I always like to check. So I'm primarily here representing Blue Team Village, which is one of the DEF CON villages, and quite obviously we cover Blue Team. I'm also a lead of the mentor program there. So I've seen a lot of people learn in the trenches, as it were. I'm here to share the lessons. I mostly work on the work side. I work mostly on cloud security projects. That's my area of interest. And I'm also finishing up a master's degree in computer science. So lots of different perspectives there.
Wow,
Thanks.
yes, I'm excited. Thank you so much, Cassandra. Now, Maril.
Hi, I'm Maril Vernon. I'm currently a senior security engineer at Acquia. Recently was a red team offensive security engineer for Zoom video communications. So currently I lead a dedicated purple team.
Awesome, thank you so much. And David.
Hi, I'm David Maynor. I've been in the industry for a while. I focus primarily on applying offensive techniques to defensive situations, almost exactly the purple team situation. While I work for Equinix, my statements are of my own. I don't represent Equinix's thoughts or interests or whatnot. And I'd like to finish out my introduction with some quotes I've gathered about me from random people. I have one here from Bryson Bort, who calls me the greatest mind that he has definitely encountered in this generation, and also the snappiest dresser. That was very polite. That's very great, Bryson. I also have one from Barack Obama. He said, "Who's that?" Very, very accurate. And Chris Rock has voted me least likely to slap him at the Purple Team Awards.
Thank you for that, David. That's a great way to introduce yourself. Okay, so now that the introductions are out of the way, why don't we talk a little bit about what Log4Shell is? So as we all know, the official announcement was actually, it came, I believe it was in December 9. The Apache disclosed a critical severity vulnerability in its Log4Shell logging utility, which obviously records activity within the Java applications. So the US National Vulnerability Database rates this vulnerability, Log4Shell obviously, as a 10 out of 10 it's in the severity scale. The vulnerability is particularly complex, well, because Log4j, as we know, it's widely used and is easy to exploit. The vulnerability also can be remotely exploited by adversaries to gain unauthorized access to systems and so on. At the same time, its announcement back in December unleashed a frantic race. I'm pretty sure we all can agree with that, right? From one extreme, companies and administrators from all over the world rushed to secure their systems, while gangs of cyber criminals at the level of county rushed to get a slice before the situation was controlled. But of course, the race continues. This is why we're here. And as a final note on that, allow me to share what are some of the companies out there saying about these. So David Kennedy, as we know, CEO of Trusted Sec, he wrote, "It will take years to address this, while attackers will be looking on a daily basis to exploit it. This is a ticking bomb for companies." Now, binary defense says one of the most notable vulnerabilities of the last decade. And lastly, security firm Checkpoint reported over 800,000 exploitations attempts were detected in the first 72 hours after Log4j issue became public. That's pretty crazy stuff. Now, again, as we already know, this year's UniCon theme is collaboration. And naturally, we aim to emphasize the value of collaboration as an approach to unifying various information security skill sets. At the end of the day, this is what Purple Team is all about, right? Now, I don't want to keep talking. And as the title of this discussion suggests, Log4Shell vulnerability indeed created the perfect purple storm. And it is now the time to hear from our amazing panelists. Let's see what lessons they have learned. And why don't we start with the first question? Now, I'm gonna go with what I see here and now I don't have any specific order. So please, feel free to, to just kind of like, let's just let it flow organically. I guess that's what I want to say. So the first question that I would like to ask is, prior to LogJ, had your company, red teams and blue teams conducted joint training or tabletop exercises? Why don't we start with Cassandra again?
Thanks. So I've actually seen quite a wide range of responses to this question. I'm sourcing from the Blue Team Village community, we pretty much ran the gamut in terms of preparedness. And, definitely heard from a lot of the probably the less stressed people that they had actually done these exercises before, and that probably helped improve a lot of the process surrounding addressing Log4j. And there were definitely some people who came to a happy hour very stressed out and needing to vent because the organizations had not really, they probably expected this to happen at some point and didn't work enough towards actually going through the rounds to figure out how they were going to address it when it did pop up. So quite the range.
Wow.
My organization did, but I worked beyond just my organization. So when the vulnerability came, there was a couple of days between the vulnerability coming out and what I'm going to refer to as Log Friday. There was plenty of time where the vulnerability had been disclosed, but people weren't very interested in it because even though it had a high CVSS score, it didn't really seem like that big a deal. And it really didn't seem like that big a deal until people started popping Minecraft servers with it. And even then, I saw pushback, not particularly in my internal organization, but with people I was working with. They were like, well, we don't run Minecraft, so, we don't really have a problem with it. And that began, I think, probably the greatest fog of war of any incident I've ever worked, where people just didn't understand what was going on and how it was going on and why it was going on. And that led to a lot of problems. Like, most people thought of exploits as these long, elaborate scripts or whatnot that would require, shell code or something like that. And I would see emails or Slack messages go back and forth with live exploits in them, not defanged or anything, and people going, well, hey, I just got all these off of a blog. What should we do with them? Like, well, you shouldn't send them through your internal email system because those are the exploit. Like, no, they're just like some URL that starts with JNDI. No, those are the exploits. Don't send them. Don't message them. Those are bad. And I still have to tell people that. I'll randomly get somebody going, hey, can you help me with this? I got this bug. I'm like, that's a live JNDI exploit. So that fog of war was serious. And I don't think there were a lot of organizations, no matter how prepared they were prepared for the amount of confusion that came from what the actual vulnerability was, what was vulnerable, and what to actually do with it.
Yeah, I'll say it. The org I was with when this came out, we had run joint exercises before the Purple Team program was alive and well. They were usually, however,
Hey, was that somebody?
I know, I was gonna say, we could see your Slack up there.
Oh wow, were you gonna do a live demonstration of sending a coworker
a live bug?
Yeah, a live bug.
So sorry.
Yeah. No, we had been running collaborative exercises already, but they were usually individual objectives, or they were objectives inherited from red team operations. I don't know that we had run any tabletop exercises. If they had, we were not included. It was probably more of a BCP or the risk folks, because at my org it was very segregated. So they didn't loop us in on any tabletop exercises being done. But I will say that I really wish that we had used this as an opportunity for Giant Purple Team, or for just to work collaboratively with them during Log Friday. They didn't want to loop us in at all. They were like, listen, red team, pipe down, simmer down over there, just sit down and be quiet. We have actual incidents that we're dealing with. We don't have time for your crap right now. And I'm like, we can help you, but that's okay. So that was kind of the history of collaborative testing over there.
I guess the theme that I'm hearing is, I guess collaboration could be something that it could have been implemented from early on, but we're here. I mean, we're all learning in a way, right? Now, allow me to ask the second question. How do you filter through the noise? I mean, obviously the noise found in the early days of an incident to identify what actions the data, the team actually needed to know. Meaning there was so much data, as David mentioned before, right? Like there was so much confusion is the word he used. How did you guys filter through that noise?
Well, I don't know about many other people, but IP-based IOCs are coming to an end in my mind for their real usefulness. IP and domain-based IOCs, because you can just acquire IPs and domains trivially.
Yeah, another one.
Right. So that doesn't matter. So the majority of the conflict I saw was people collecting like, oh, I've got a honeypot and I saw this, right? And they dumped a bunch of information, and you go, well, that's not contextualized. And you look at it and you go, most of those are scanners. I don't want to give anyone huge shout outs, but Gray Noise was both helpful and a hindrance, because Gray Noise was scanning the internet for problems. And a lot of people were like, hey, we found this IP address that was looking for this. And you go, no, that's a scanner. That's not bad. But then execs also hear those stats like checkpoint dropped. Oh my God, 800,000 exploitation attempts, right? And suddenly nothing matters anymore. You've got your CISO's jobs on the line, so that they suddenly were like, stop everything. You can't patch, or you can't do anything. We gotta understand. So the problem I saw for a majority of organizations is that no one actually did filter through. Like there were, I know a lot of orgs would there were a lot of trust sharing groups I was in where they were passing around like long lists of IOCs, and months later now you look at them and go, nothing actually ever triggered.
So this is an interesting question. This is an interesting question, and I kind of put it into two different categories. So, I think for identifying like what actions or data the team needs to know, it's both a process question and also a technical question. And in many cases, the process question is actually the more important one. You need some amount of process in place to determine how to make decisions about what data to act on before you can really do anything beyond that. Like, if you're filtering for data, then how do you determine what is going to be the best things? What are the best things to look for? What is the escalation priority of any particular result? And I think that there's a lot of process that needs to be in place to make that an efficient conversation, instead of individuals finding a lot of information and getting overwhelmed with what the results are and not knowing what to do about it. From a technical perspective, I mean, it really comes down to having robust inventory and robust logging, the ability to quickly onboard new log sources that may have not been perceived as needed before. And then the other component of that is also like basically find information from your community. The whole community kind of came together and started passing around like, hey, here's a thing to look for. This is actually more useful. And, so being able to bring that in, I think definitely helps clarify what information is actually going to be useful.
Yeah, I wasn't really a part of the helping filter through the noise effort because we on the red team aren't given access to a lot of the security management and threat hunting platforms at my old org. But I will say that like something red teams could have done, however, you'd have had to be prepared for this, is like if you did have a lab environment, like because we should all have sophisticated lab environments where we can, detonate certain IOCs or test certain payloads, and you can actually see like on the user end, like what kind of prompts you get or any kind of activity or any kind of logging that it generates. We could have all taken those live exploits that we can all find on the internet now, and we could have detonated them in lab environments and been like, this is what we're seeing. We can tell you that if you were to see this, it combined with this is adversarial actions, this is adversarial mindset. These are things we would look for to further one of our own objectives. And we could have taken that purple approach and started educating the blue team on helping them filter through their own noise. But again, we weren't asked. And I don't know that even if we had contributed that, how much we would have helped, because they were just having a lot of overwhelm at that time.
That sounds like an organizational process failure.
Yeah.
Or
Yes,
maybe
does.
a more missed opportunity. Is that one of those?
No,
Maybe.
that's
We
called
didn't have
failure
the
or
lab ready
failure.
to go. We didn't have the lab ready to go either. Like we were still on our to-do list, I think, to get a lab up and going. But if we'd had one, we could have done that.
Well, I did have a lab. In people, when you have a cultural environment where people are more used to reading vendor announcements than they are internal updates, right? So having to fight vendor announcements was also a bit of a rough spot for a lot of organizations, because even the vendors were publishing incorrect information.
Yeah.
And this all comes down to a very, very interesting question of metrics, right? Like, so if you were there, you were the red team, you could have helped, how would you have metrics captured for your participation, right? Like, no one cares about the number of IP addresses you ruled out, or at least that's what I observed, from a third party point of view on Log Friday.
Probably, I think the metrics that most stakeholders would have been concerned with are like mean dwell time, mean time to respond, mean time to investigate, things like that.
But the majority of what was passed around was not malicious. So there were very little actual dwell time metrics that were able to be gathered. Mm-hmm. And then when you looked at your stack of what's been compromised, like, from first party to third party, that's a huge problem, because I can't tell you the number of people I talked to that started with, I don't run Minecraft, and then I don't run Apache, and then I don't run Java, and then, our app developers use this for the app that we build.
At some point, somewhere it was used.
Yes, right. And the fastest way to determine that was, a red team control environment where you would send live exploits and have a honeypot and see what connected back in your org. But there was a lot of arguing about who would do that and why would it be done and whatnot.
Yeah, a lot of people were running these vulnerable platforms, vulnerable languages, and they didn't know it because just kind of goes back to that CIS first 5, like asset management, license management, software program management. No one really knows what's running at any given time. It's like, oh, well, we don't mostly use Java, except for that one time that we did. Is that a problem?
That's where you need that asset inventory.
Yeah, if you look at asset inventory, my hat's off to you, because I haven't met an org yet.
Yeah, no, it's harder.
I'm still struggling.
I'm like, do you know you have a rogue switch in that guy's office over there? No, we don't. Yeah, you do. No, we don't. Yeah, you
There
do.
was an incident years back at a previous job where there was a vulnerability that came out that affected, I think it was on-prem Exchange servers. And I remember being like, I'm pretty sure we have one. And it took me like a good week or two of chasing people down to prove that we did in fact have one. And I mean, it wasn't like completely publicly exposed or anything, but then it took me another like 3 or 4 weeks to like actually get them to patch it. And it was like, you couldn't do like click one quick scan to figure out that you had this and it was vulnerable and you should have patched it.
And
Yeah.
even if you know what's in your environment, my biggest takeaway from that was that people have no idea about the services they rely on.
Nope.
Yeah, or the software dependencies. Yeah, I mean,
Or
it's
what
like
versions
they
they're
put
running?
that over to like the app development team, third-party code or third-party dependency scanning is like something that's usually categorized as DevOps, and you're lucky if you get sec somewhere in there.
Yeah. Like I've run scans and found Windows 7. I've run scans and found Open Telnet. I've run scans and found things that you're like, we definitely don't have any of this, right? No, wrong. You've definitely got it.
Need
It's
for
rough.
Okay. Now let me ask, were there established communication channels for the blue teams to receive, for example, data, intel, patches in real time? And what are some of the effective ways to build those communication channels?
Well, we had communication channels. It's just people dropped a lot of live exploits in them. Which, this is a very unique problem. Like in general, you don't have a tweetable size, full exploit.
True, they're not usually very big.
Tweetable is completely a metric of InfoSec.
It should, if it wasn't before, it has to be now.
Yeah.
Like that's a factor of spreadability right there. Because I mean, even weeks after, I would still find people that had it like in their Twitter name, and they were like, "Haha, this is funny." It's like, I don't think you understand the problems you're causing. So,
speaking of communication channels, I think there are two very important ones. One's the formal one. Great, you have established, trusted sources where you get information from, but you also have the informal network, which is a lot harder to sort through, but oftentimes reacts much faster. So, again, going back to everything that got posted on Twitter, quick links to, hey, we just discovered that, this additional IOC, and, and then you can if you bring that back to an organization, you kind of can vet it a little bit. But that information definitely came across as being more quick and accessible and actionable in a way that a lot of the more formal sources were not. So maybe a bit of a danger zone there, but I think that did play a very important role. And I think it also says a lot about the flexibility of an organization to be able to actually understand that that is a valid way to receive information. Because from what I've seen, a lot of the more siloed or bureaucracy-heavy organizations, their reaction time is a lot slower because of the amount of red tape that you need to get through to make decisions to allow information to be disseminated and acted upon. So it's kind of an interesting reflection on organizations to see, how well they actually were receptive to that community-sourced information.
And also, you shouldn't drop live exploits in your comms channel. So I'm just gonna, I can't get over that one enough.
I'm totally stuck in inventory, so I understand. We have to take a slice of the pie,
Right.
I can't tell you how many times during like infrastructure or like payload development, someone will like drop our malicious domain in chat. I'm like, stop doing that. Use brackets around a period or something. They're going to find this so fast and burn us before our op is even off the ground. But same goes for live exploits, children. Don't share. Friends don't let friends share live exploits.
Friends don't let friends share live exploit. I need a t-shirt.
Yeah, if anyone needs a lesson on what JNDI is or why it's bad, just don't trust anything you see for about the next 3 years with that in the leading subdomain. Okay, just don't.
Well, so what's funny is the Log4J problem also caused, a huge uproar with like Spring4Shell, right? People were so shell-shocked. They're like, oh, it's happening again. It's like, no, this is different. It takes a lot of weird stuff to trigger for you to. It's like, no, like somebody's already said there's 90 100 billion exploit attempts on Twitter. Well, okay.
Were they successful?
No, none of them were. The majority of the Log4j exploit attempts that they weren't successful.
Also,
No one ever asked those things.
I get that we love like our cool names, but like the second you went from Log4j vulnerability to Log4Shell, everyone's, oh my God, it's shell shock. Oh my God, they can get shells everywhere. And it's like, well, eventually, yes. But like, maybe not that bad right off the bat. Takes a few steps to get there.
Well, there were a lot of InfoSec personalities that were like, oh, it's Log2Shell. Or no, I can't remember what the original one was going to be, but it's like, that's already been taken. So let's go with Log4Shell.
On that note, when one of these incidents happen like that, like a 0-day incident, how do you communicate the urgency to the leadership?
Well, I've found it's best to wait for CISOs to feel like their job is in danger, and then they'll.
I thought that was a prerequisite of being a CISO.
That is a prerequisite.
Your job is always in danger.
But nobody cares until they're like, oh, this is a bad thing. It's like, oh, wow, you read dark reading today. If only you'd read it yesterday.
Right. My first CISO ever used to walk around the most laid back, like easygoing guy I knew. And I'm like, how are you not like worried all the time? He's like, most CISOs only last like 18 months in their role. And I've already been here 3 years. So I'm already killing it. At this point, I mean, anything else I get is gravy. I'm like, that's a good outlook to have, I guess. But I just think that, I think that people just need to avoid giving fear-induced updates, right? Like, don't give updates for the sake of saying, oh, we're aware of this thing is happening and it's bad, it's super bad. Like take a beat and quantify the thing, validate the sources, validate the information, educate yourself on what it is or why it's bad. Because their first question, once you say, shit, we have a 10.0 crit vulnerability in the system, they're gonna be like, why? How bad is that? What does that mean? And if you don't know, you're like, we don't know. We're working on it. Is it
really a 10 out of 10 or is it like?
It depends on your environment, right? I mean, I don't know what kind of WAF you're running. I don't know what kind of libraries you have enabled and disabled. I don't know what kind of request validation you have for HTTP headers. I hope you have them. But if you don't have any of those things, I mean, it could be pretty bad. So I just think that it's like super, super important when you're giving, especially updates when you do have a 0-day to C-levels and higher echelons of management to make sure that they're value added. Make sure that they're objectively driven. They're not like, you're not inserting any kind of subjective commentary into them at all. You can give them like the best and the worst, like, at worst, it could mean this, but at best we could be mitigated. Like we are looking into it. But I just think that like, it's really important to avoid communicating disinformation. And when things are new, we're doing a lot of guessing, we're doing a lot of postulating, we're doing a lot of, does that mean this? Does that mean that? Does that mean this? And that's all good to do because it's driving discussion, but not all of those are necessarily updates for senior leadership because they're the ones who are going to report to people like the board and people like your cyber and security insurance representatives who are going to want to know just how bad this potentially is. And if you have, an event, an incident, or a breach potentially happening.
So
I'm a big fan of like duplicating, writing your own version or understand the exploit in the lab first before
communicating it to someone else.
Yeah, before communicating with somebody else, because that helped me understand how bad Log4j was and just how not an issue Spring4Shell was.
So yeah, there's also kind of again two channels. So I absolutely agree with kind of boiling it down to facts, removing as much subjective opinion as possible. I think that's really the best way to kind of get the point across and have it be as clear as possible. I would still put a little bit of emphasis on like what could possibly go wrong, but I think psychologically it's people are more afraid of what they have to lose than they actually have to gain by something. So it's kind of a tactic that you can lean into a little bit. And I think from a somewhat political perspective at an organization, for anything, whether it's acknowledging a vulnerability or getting a new product or something like that, you kind of have to build a case for it. And it's great if your senior leadership understands and trusts you and buys into it right away. But if you're not in that position, I think one of the other things that you can do is have already established good trust between different teams and actually socialize the information and kind of get buy-in from more than just your leadership And then you might eventually get a groundswell of like, okay, so we've got someone on the developer team, right? And like, you're basically saying like, hey, there's this vulnerability in this Java library, and it's potentially going to cause issues, especially when things start having to get pulled or taken off the network just because of this dependency. And you're appealing to something that they're heavily invested in, even though they're not a security person. So I think that you can kind of use that to your advantage in a way to get further buy-in, and that's kind of an example of how you would do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree completely. I err on the more technical side because I write exploits and stuff like that. But that process is something I wish I was better at for that very reason. I mean, having to fight fights, especially the same fight over and over again because of the lack of buy-in, it is just soul shattering.
Yeah, everyone needs a little bit of social engineering in their lives.
Speaking of that, we should all watch Fletch.
I want to apologize for not being able to remove the screen share. I was having so many issues, and I'm sorry. I guess
it's not a live event if there aren't AV issues. Just
Oh,
a given.
It's not a live event.
Are we going to demo later? We should totally demo live later. It'll be
We should
Live
totally
demos.
I know who had the proof of concept ready to go.
There's a reason I don't work in AV anymore.
David, did you have a question? I saw you raising your hand.
Oh no, I had the proof of concept ready to go.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We were,
Just say no.
if you don't exploit your fellow panelists, is it really even a panel?
I see this escalating.
I mean, demos never
very-
work live, right? So we're automatically safe. Our mitigation for this is that demos never fire in a live environment when you want them to, right? Pwn to own, no one.
So all you have to
Three
do then
attempts.
is not tell people you're doing it until afterwards.
Woo!
Then it's not a demo. Then it's just being a bad person.
You need to do me a favor and click this link. It's totally legit.
I have one more question. So based on everything we've been learning, and I highly appreciate it, I'm sure everybody here, we all appreciate how much knowledge you have, you've been sharing with us. So far, as of now, what are the lessons learned that you see in the early days as the information was still being gathered?
God, so many lessons learned. Okay, so I'm just gonna go first because from a purple standpoint, the things that purple teams really assess are not so much the technical controls, although like you can write new detections and things like that. But like really, I think a lot of what we've emphasized is just how many administrative and process failures there were. So, a lot of red teams come at an org as like people, processes, and technology. Because when you have a fall short in like your DFIR processes, we get to remain on persistence in your networks for way longer than we should. And I think one of the things that we consistently saw with Log4j and many 0 days like SolarWinds is that communication channels, those need to be set up ahead of time. Lab environments and sandboxes, those need to be set up ahead of time. Tabletops need to be conducted. You need to theorize, let your exploit developers write custom exploits and fire one off and see what your incident response people do. Don't warn them. See if they're notifying the right people, if they're communicating with each other, if they're investigating things all the way. Are they just shutting down one session that they see on a certain port or service, or are they investigating all the way to the IP and trying to shut down infrastructure as much as they can? Are you communicating effectively to upper and lower leadership? Are we socializing laterally as much as we're socializing when an incident's happening vertically? And are we using all the teams at our disposal? Because again, the red team wasn't used at all. We definitely could have helped. Certain DFIR teams had a really heavy hand and weren't using the other like SOC teams or the detection engineering teams like at all. I just think that from an overall lessons learned perspective, it's that if you can really nail down, again, those CIS first 5, if if something came out and you're like, I know what systems those are running on. I know how many we have. I know what versions they're running. I know why they haven't been upgraded. I know where they were in the patch cycle. I know where we are in the vulnerability management cycle. If you have all those things locked down, you are already so much better to at least identify and contain a 0 day than people who are like, are we running that? Are you sure? I don't know. You can immediately take yourself and put yourself in that next box of progression. Then you can focus on the nuanced things like, now are we working together effectively? Now do we have a great way to get a proof of concept and test for that thing and see what systems it's actually running on? So just please, from your process perspective, don't ignore these things. Don't just start like spinning up red teams and conducting operations and focusing on the critical findings when you haven't even done the very, very basics, because true security in depth is doing the basics very, very well. Don't make yourself low-hanging fruit that you don't need to be, especially when it comes to 0 days.
I totally, you basically took all the words right out of my mouth. I had like a list here and you just like checked off every single one.
That's because she owns you, right? During the time,
I totally got that
domain admin now.
I was like, what's this link? Let me just click that and see what happens.
For panelists only. Hot, hot, hot. Check now.
I actually did have a lot of the same points. And there's a couple other things I want to emphasize too. And like, I think a lot of the lower level stuff points out a need for visibility into your whole organization, both from a process perspective and also from a tools and technology perspective. You know, again, I will go with it. Having some amount of asset inventory that covers as much as possible, having logs collected, and if not ingested into a SIM, then at least at a point where they can easily start to flow into a SIM or other, service that you use for detection. But a lot of it's going to be that process and practice. And, coming from the blue team side, with others on the red team side, and obviously this is a purple team focused event, and SCYTHE is obviously very, a purple team tool. I think that going through that process and practicing and seeing where the gaps are, that's visibility in itself. So that's purple teams as a visibility exercise more than just a detection focused exercise. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know if you're actually over here for anyone else, but for me, you're over here. So I'm pointing.
I figured it was just like jazz hands or something. It's fine. It's all good. So one other point I actually wanted to make about that, I saw from different people from Blue Team Village talking about their experiences. We saw, again, a wide range. We have siloed organizations, similar to what Maril was talking about, where, there wasn't quite as much collaboration between that red team and blue team, and responsibilities are kind of dictated along those lines. I think that really I wouldn't even say that if you allowed that collaboration, you double your effectiveness, you'd probably like quadruple it, because you need that knowledge sharing. You can have all the tools in the world that detect all the different little things, but if you put more than one brain at it, you're going to get a lot more result, because you're going to have people collaborating, sharing perspectives, and when you see someone doing something else or bringing in a fresh perspective on a problem, it may help you reframe the problem for yourself as well. So I think there's really like exponential results that you can get by doing that. And then the last thing I saw as well is that it actually opened a lot of opportunity for people, especially, kind of tier 1, tier 2 people in incident response or even, SOC analysts and whatnot, giving them the ability to actually like embrace the community information and kind of run with it. And like, we're hackers. We like complicated problems. We like thinking outside the box, and to actually give your people the ability to run with something a little bit and get a feel for it and get excited by being able to see all the pieces fall together. I think that actually winds up empowering the team to be better overall. And any organization that is not trying to support that and capitalize on it is not going to progress in their red, blue, or purple team activities.
And you're wasting expensive experts. Just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real bad sin, is the wasting of the expert information and time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then again, and to further that, not supporting those people, not cross-training within your teams to allow those 12-hour people working 12-hour days to actually have some handoff, well, that's also problematic.
Yeah. And to riff off what Cassandra said, do your damn baselining. Don't just say, oh, we've got Carbon Black or we've got CrowdStrike and we're good now. Oh, Cylance will pick that up for us. Don't just trust those things. Baseline your defenses. If everything is working as intended, it should be confirmed as working as intended. Not just we assume that this tool will save us from this thing. Confirm your baselines, figure out what's working and how well it's working, and then figure out what other solutions you need on top of your gaps, and then test those things to make sure they're addressing the gaps that they should be addressing.
Yeah,
if you're purple team concept.
If you've tested all of your rules and okay, all my rules work, that's great, but are your rules actually covering the full potential of what they could? Or are you saying, like, let's just turn these 10% on because they're going to work?
Well, they're not going to be very loud. They're going to be noisy. The other 90%, they generate too much work.
There's always a
Yeah.
fine balance there.
I think that's why it's so important, the tabletop discussions and the purple team exercises, right? Just bring so much visibility into the cyber processes. What do we expect? It's so interesting to just actually also see sometimes what during those discussions, the teams might have an expectation, but then the reality is completely different. And this is where the visibility really comes into play, right?
Mhm.
I saw a note in the chat mentioning SBOMs as well, software bill of materials. And yes, that is absolutely part of asset inventory.
1000%.
Indeed. The thing I took away from this the most is that I thought everybody was on the same page, that like IP and domain-based IOCs, like the general dwell time on these and recyclability of things from like Amazon or like it's so high that they're really low quality now for most exploits. And I thought everybody knew that.
I thought SolarWinds taught us that. Weird.
Yeah, I did too. But I was wrong. I don't know. The majority of the information, or the majority of the lessons learned from it were all process based. Like the technology, changes, and if you can write your own exploits to verify it, like I do, like that's one thing. But if you can't communicate it or get people to listen to you, then everything else you're doing is just literally for fun, for lulz, right? Like so. If you don't have the buy-in, if you don't have the trust and whatnot, then you're wasting your time anyway.
Yeah. And if your exercise objectives and your offensive testing objectives aren't coming from CTI, you're also doing it for lulz. You're just throwing a dart at the MITRE matrix and saying, guess we'll test against that today. You have no idea that's actually decreasing your attack surface or not.
I'd like to get everyone's thoughts on how awesome it would have been for MITRE to release everybody's 100% score, and then Log4j happened. Like, no, we're completely fine. Look, 100%.
100%. What does that even mean? What does that 100% even mean? I don't know.
It means 100p. It means they're all in, all the time.
All the things. We defend now against all the things. Come at us.
And if you don't have a tool, if you don't have a tool or knowledge to actually test it yourself. Because there were some names on that list I went, wait, I literally have a bypass for you right now. I don't know how better to shrug.
You can't shrug hard enough. You can't shrug with enough emphasis.
And I think this is a unique situation because COVID has put us all in individual rooms and nobody can see me going.
This is why I don't turn my video on during conference calls. There's not my Picard facepalm is my spirit animal.
I usually get muted. I'm ready. I'm ready to have some discussions. Everyone's like, Maril's muted, right? Maril's on mute. You muted her? She's muted. Great.
It's like server muted.
I have a bypass for that. Joke's on you.
So when are we going to see the next situation that's as bad as Log4j?
Oh God.
My desk is wood and I'm knocking on it.
By the time we see the next one, probably not.
I'm guessing the week before Vegas, like Vegas summer camp.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, it's probably going to happen right before summer camp. What do you want to bet?
What do you guys think is going to be the biggest problem that we're going to face this year with this?
With Log4j?
Yes.
Well, right now, we have micro patches, but the only true mitigations we have are to completely disable and isolate that library, or to separate it on its own VLAN, or to disable those JNDI calls at all, which breaks functionality. So unfortunately, it's going to be how the security teams can support the functional teams, like Cassandra was saying, the developers and the admins and the custodians and the people who need things to work. Whereas we need them to work as securely as possible. They often say security is in opposition to ease of function, but like right now it was like, this is bad. We're just going to get rid of it for the time being, and good. Now it's in a Faraday cage. What do? We need to bring it back eventually, but we don't know how to securely bring it back. So our biggest challenge this year is going to be how do we get a better mitigation on top of it? Like, what else can we do? What else can we pile on top of it? Because you can't remove a risk. You can only mitigate it as much as possible. And we don't really know what that looks like yet.
You're
Or
never going to
transfer
make it
it.
to CISO with that kind of
Transfer it.
mindset.
I'm
You
a
could
big
deny
fan
it
of
exists. The risk does
so-
not exist. I don't accept that risk.
So
There is no
I'm a
limit.
huge fan, I'm a huge fan of cloud security. That's like what I focus on. And my answer to all this is basically like, hey, how about you just run like microservices serverless for all of your applications and not have Java installed at all, because it's kind of terrible. Let's be real.
You
And
could get rid of Java. Migrate off Java this year. That should be all of y'all's goal. Migrate off
Yeah,
Java.
But on a serious note, my answer to that question is actually burnout, because I think that the the people that are working these incidents, and also on the operations side. So I have a background in IT and systems administration, and repetitive work that is unsatisfying is incredibly mentally stressful. So I feel that, without significant technological protections and mitigations in place, we're going to be seeing a lot of people just burnt out from having to deal with the same thing at the same stress level over a long period of time. And that's where organizational support for all of the different teams is absolutely critical.
Yeah, if anyone was holding off a major migration to cloud or getting on serverless or something like that because of cost or resource constraint or something, I think this just kind of proves that now is the time. Or you're going to face another problem a year from now when a lot of people are resigning or no one loves their work or people are just over it. So it's like, at least a migration will give them something new to work on, new platforms to learn, new challenges, and change up their day-to-day and solve your problem at the same time. Not tomorrow, not next month. It's going to take like 6 months to 9, but eventually your problem will be solved, and everyone will be happier as a result, because those folks had to pull all week, all day or all night or all weekenders right before Christmas, and they haven't recovered from that yet.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I'm not usually one to say there's a one size fits all solution. Serverless microservices architectures don't work for everything, but I think one of the other overall lessons and things that needs to be emphasized going forward is, a lot of times a client or, a colleague or someone I know comes up with it, like they have a technical question, and the best thing to do is to walk it back to like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Mhm.
If that problem can be solved in a way that avoids having to expend a lot of extra effort for technology that may not be necessary, then you need to have that and keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That happened.
Don't go overboard.
That happened exactly to me. The question was, hey, can we proxy Jindy requests through an API firewall? And I was like, wait, stop. What problem are you trying to solve? Or is this just like a mental exercise kind of thing?
Yeah, Donald just dropped in the chat that the biggest challenge will be compliance expectations, that all Log4j instances should be patched already.
That's a good one.
That's unfortunately,
Ooh.
that's going to go back to so many things. It's going to go back to, do you even know all the instances of Log4j you have running? Do you even know all the web servers you have that are vulnerable? Do you even know all the libraries and instances of it that would need to be isolated and need to be patched? Not to mention, again, we don't really have a patch for it yet. We kind of have some micro patches that will kind of help. You can get a WAF in there. You can do a double WAF and DMZ yourself, but like, there's not a ton we can
WAF.
Double WAFs. You get a WAF and you get a WAF and everybody gets a WAF. But really, like, unfortunately, from
it's over SSL.
Yeah,
from
a GRC perspective, all they're going to want to see is that you're doing your due diligence. All they're going to want to see is that you are operating in a reasonably secure manner as much as possible. And like, honestly, we're all doing what we can at this point. This is the kind of thing where you can't just say, SolarWinds came out yesterday, did you fix that yet? Like, it's not like that. So from a GRC perspective, if a breach happens because of Log4j, we're going to see it for a little bit. There's going to be more fallout, sadly. But that's an absolutely unrealistic expectation for GRC departments to have on the IT ops and cybersecurity departments. So we need to stop that mindset right now.
You should also have at least one person in your organization that has read the Log4j like patch history, because every time I get sad now, I just go look at that patch history, and it just makes me smile so much that I don't work with them. But in a lot of orgs, I saw the instant GRC kind of, well, we got to send out letters to verify. You're like, there's like 3 guys. Now there's like 4, right? Like, what are you expecting? Like, this is free software. You're like, no, there's a team. There's gonna be like 1,200 people on this. It's like, no,
there's an XKCD meme for that, and it's that little stick that supports this thing, and it's maintained by some guy in Minnesota or somewhere.
But management will always go, how do we get in this situation? You told people to Docker up. They Docker up. They don't know what's going on in there. Nobody has a software bomb.
Everyone started using a thing that was well done until it was used everywhere. And then you bought that thing without knowing what was in it. You bought the car, but you didn't check the engine, did you?
Engines. Cars don't have engines. Elon Musk told me that.
You didn't check the battery, did you?
So one more thing before we
We're a very sarcastic bunch.
We're fun.
see that. I think you guys are pretty fun in my opinion. So what is your hot take on the Spring4Shell?
Non-issue.
Not an issue?
Non-issue.
On the what? The frame for shell?
Spring4Shell.
Oh, Spring4Shell. Why is it not an issue?
So people were channeling Log4J and thought, oh my God, this is another version of it. But you had to have there has to be like weird non-standard scenarios in which it's exploited. And if you had, a great purple team testing tool, I don't know, who can I think of? SCYTHE makes one, right?
Oh,
yeah.
weird.
But all joking aside, like if people had actually tested it before they were like, oh no, spin up the patch police, they would have realized it was a non-issue. Like I sent out an internal alert. It was like, don't accelerate your patching cycle for this. Like there are times when you definitely need to. This is not it.
My hot take is I kind of hope it scares the blank insert word here out of higher ups in organizations into working on the process, cross-team collaboration, and full utilization of available resources and onboarding of new ones if necessary, in preparation for something that eventually does wind up being more catastrophic in a way that Log4Shell was.
Yeah. I think don't freak out, find it, kill it, find it, discuss it, mitigate it.
I'm a big fan of never letting a good crisis go to waste. But when people find out that they did all this and they go, wait, that wasn't actually an exploitable bug, they then reject it. They're like, oh, all this work is for nothing. We're never going to have dual communication channels because it's a waste of time. And then that guy will have an anecdote for the rest of his career about why he can't have good security processes. It's just a waste of time, man.
I don't think it's a waste of time. I think people.
Well, no, it's not. But that's like if you put all this work into it, and then somebody goes, "Hey, Spring4Shell isn't really exploitable."
Yeah, but if you socialize it well enough, you can mitigate that.
Yeah,
well, that's it.
I just practice your social engineering.
My little risk heart wishes people would stop interpreting CVSS scores as risk scores because they're not the same. They're not all the same. And one severity for someone else is not the same as a severity for a different org. Organizational context, people, is a thing.
Context is king or queen or ungendered.
Non-binary.
Context is really good. Context is good.
Of the land.
Yeah.
Context is supreme entity.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Supreme intelligence. We'll go with that one.
We are almost 5 minutes before we wrap up. I want to ask the audience if they have any questions, please just put it in the chat. And also for you guys, any last pearls of wisdom that you guys want to share with us?
Pearl is horrible.
Pearl is horrible.
My pearl of wisdom is Pearl is horrible. Larry Wall committed crime. You know what? I'm sorry. That was supposed to be a funny joke. But with everything going on in Ukraine right now, I can't really accuse Larry Wall of committing war crimes. Maybe regionalized police crimes, but definitely not war crimes. We should all support Ukraine.
We should do that.
Also,
I know some people that'll
support
fight
Larry
you
Wall.
on Pearl.
Yeah.
I know some people that'll fight you on Pearl. I'll say Python.
I'll be out in the parking lot right after this.
I'm gonna stay over here in shell code.
No, my last pearl of wisdom is, for God's sake, have inventory. Inventory your hardware, your software, your VMs, everything in the cloud, everything on premise, all your network appliances, every piece of software you have running and what it depends on, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, she took what would have been my first one. I hope she's still over here. But since she did, I'm going to reiterate what David said and just say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. We've seen several 0 days, very, very bad ones pop up recently. take these, do after action reviews, and ask yourself what worked, what didn't work, why didn't it work, and how can we fix it next time? And then tabletop that thing, practice that thing, opt for that thing. I don't care if you have to deliver a note to someone that says, you just found a callback to C2 domain. What do you do now? And you literally watch him run to the person that he would talk to next. Like, you just need to test your processes, and you need to make sure that they're all working and everyone knows who the next person is that they escalate to or that they report to, what information they need to give, and then what their next action steps are. If you don't know those things, then even if you were to find the damn thing, you don't know what to do about it. And that's a bad place to be from a security perspective, but a sweet place to be from my perspective. And you don't want me to win. You really don't.
So we couldn't curse. I had to stop myself several times. Was cursing okay?
Or I'm sorry, no one told me not to.
Oh,
I didn't get that.
They have much more faith in you.
That was in the
apparently.
speaker instructions. I didn't get it. Yet another opportunity for process improvement.
Have you guys noticed that Bryson's been holding that pose the entire time?
I'm impressed. He hasn't even breathed.
I know. The guy is like awesome.
Well, with that, I think it's safe to wrap up. Bryson, it is awesome. Everybody here says it's absolutely awesome. And we had an amazing panel today. We are so grateful. I am so grateful for everything you guys shared. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for saying yes to UniCon 2022.